Hey everybody, this is Giancarlo Alino reporting for Sportskeeda MMA, and I'm happy to be joined by my guest today, who's going to be recapping his win this past weekend. He is a Canadian featherweight that's on the rise there and looking to make some noise in the upcoming year. He is Kyle the Monster Nelson. How you doing, Kyle?
Doing great. Yeah.
And Kyle, this past weekend, Noche UFC, you kicked it off there. Very entertaining fight. Can you just talk to us of just the entertaining atmosphere that arena provided? Because the fans there, they were buzzing all night. Just what was it like to compete in that environment?
Yeah, it was awesome. I mean, the whole, lead up of fight week, again, it was Noche UFC. So Mexican Independence Day is kind of like the theme. So there were, Las Vegas was full of, a lot of like Mexicans and stuff and a lot of events, catered to the Mexican Independence Day. So it was definitely cool to see, some of that culture and stuff. And then yeah, the T-Mobile Arena, I think they sold like 18,000 tickets and stuff. So yeah, it was a packed arena, and I was fighting a Mexican guy, so I was kind of the bad guy that night. But yeah, it was definitely cool to see.
And yeah, just your opponent there, Fernando Padilla. It was a back and forth at times. Like you stuck to your game plan, and even when he got a little bit energetic there, when just the sense of urgency, it showed that you didn't panic and just stuck to it. What maybe advice did your corner give to you in between rounds just to keep you grounded and not like shoot for too many risks there?
Yeah, in between rounds, it was a lot of talk about like output and stuff. We knew, I was out landing them. I was landing the bigger shots and stuff. But again, sometimes the judges with their when they're ringside, sometimes they don't see everything. Sometimes they see a punch and it looks like it lands when it didn't, or vice versa. So we were just talking about, a little bit more output and stuff like that. Still staying safe and not getting too crazy and staying in the pocket too long, but getting in, landing my shots, and getting out, and then just trying to land two or three shots at a time.
Yeah, definitely worked there. And like you kicked off the main card. So like I know a lot of fighters when they go into an event like that, the first fight sometimes is just as loud as a main event. So what was it like? Was it anything different than you experienced in your career?
No, I mean it was exciting. It's always nice, with the crowd there. I fought at the UFC Apex as well, where there was like no crowd, so definitely a big contrast there. But yeah, the when you get a crowd like like with the Mexican fans or the UK fans, like those really hardcore combat sports fans, they definitely they cheer a little bit louder for sure.
And now, like, did it make you appreciate this more just being in a crowd? Because, like you mentioned, they're the apex, no one's there. Like, what's the, I guess, the mentality when you're going in there with no fans? Like, do you have to maybe take an extra couple hours just to get yourself mentally prepared for it?
If anything, actually fighting with no fans it's more similar to our training, because when we train, like my when we do sparring and stuff, my coaches will be there so I can hear them super clear. There's no, crowd or anything crazy going on. So it's actually a little more familiar, fighting without the crowd. But I do prefer the crowd, obviously, just for, the energy and stuff, and getting to, be in a room filled with 20,000 people.
Yeah, and just this year, all your fights have been entertaining. You're on an unbeaten streak there. Earlier in the year, you had a draw, a majority draw, but the past two back-to-back unanimous decisions. So, how have you been able to bounce back from some of your losses last year? And was there anything differently you changed in your training to get back on track here?
I've pretty much kept my training the same, in my UFC career. It's a lot of the similar stuff. We've just kind of ramped it up over the years. Um, and then, just dialing in kind of some of my weight cuts and my diet and stuff. As I get a little bit older, it's a little bit trickier making 145. So just dialing in that stuff, I think it's gone a long way in, making sure that I've got, the cardio and the gas tank to last the whole fight. It's not like I went and added a bunch more cardio. I do the same kind of cardio and stuff I've always done. It's just now that we have the diet and stuff under control. I think it translates better into the fights.
And also, you're a fighter, like you are a UFC vet, been around a long time in the sport, but every fight you just see that involvement continue. So, what do you attribute that to? That even though you're getting a little bit older, you're still evolving to where, you're closing that gap with some of these other guys that are coming up and some of the other ranked opponents that are there. Like they're looking really appealing matchups for you right now.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I feel like the longer I've been in the UFC, the more I've been able to showcase some of my skills. That I showcased a bit before the UFC, and then we just kind of got in the UFC and then hit a couple road bumps. And now, yeah, I'm just a little more comfortable, able to showcase again all the stuff that I've been doing, most of my career. Just now I'm able to kind of, do it on the big stage.
And just, mentioning there like some appealing matchups. And I have to bring this up because after your win there, you're talking. First of all, as a Canadian, you apologize to the fans that were booing. So I thought that was a nice touch there. But you called out Cub Swanson. That's a fight I think a lot of people want to see. And you kind of said, January, where the UFC's going. Rumors and reports say it's going to be in Canada. So what would it mean to you to take on Cub Swanson in your home country?
Yeah, I mean, first, even just being able to fight again in Canada, especially if they come to Toronto, would mean the world to me. I was able to fight there my first UFC fight, but again, that was 2018, and it was on like 3 days' notice, so I didn't really get to enjoy any of it. It was just kind of like run to Toronto and fight, and then go home. So it would be nice to get a full camp and get to really enjoy the experience of fighting in Toronto. And then I think an opponent like Cub Swanson, it doesn't really get much better than that. He's a veteran that everybody knows. He's fought in Toronto before, so he's got a lot of fans and stuff. And yeah, I think where my skill set's at right now, I think it's a perfect matchup.
And I know Cub Swanson, he's coming off a little bit of a controversial decision win, but what have you seen out of him in his past few fights that show like yourself that maybe there's an area you could exploit, or is this just like his resume in the sport type of thing?
Yeah, I mean, Cub's so well rounded. There isn't like really a spot that he's weak in. So we saw, he was able to strike with Hakeem, and Hakeem's a great, Muay Thai fighter. And then towards the end of the fight, he was able to take Hakeem down. His jiu-jitsu looked really good. And who knows, maybe that's what kind of stole him the fight. I still feel like Hakeem won the decision, but Cubs super well rounded, great wrestling, great jits, great striking. So I don't think this is a fight where there's going to be any one spot where I'm going to be a lot better than him. I think it's going to be, just being a little bit better than him in all those areas, and then just making sure I put together the right game plan and kind of almost put on a perfect fight in order to make sure I get the victory.
And also, like, if that happens in Toronto, I'm obviously biased. I would love that to take place in Toronto as well. But you fought in Vancouver this past June, and the fans are like the UFC coming back to Vancouver, coming back to Canada. Obviously, COVID stopped that from happening earlier. But what was it like for yourself? Because you mentioned the 3 days notice fighting in Toronto. So to get that camp in and going into Vancouver, soak in the UFC's return with all the Canadians on the card, what was that experience like?
Yeah, I mean, it was definitely one of the highlights so far of my UFC career. It's and even when I first got in the UFC, like nobody really knew who I was anyways. So, to walk out in front of the crowd, for UFC Toronto, they cheered for me because I was Canadian, but again, nobody really knew who I was. By the time, I fought in UFC Vancouver in June, I'd been in the sport, for a long time. That was my seventh UFC fight, so like everybody kind of knew who I was. So the crowd was definitely, really behind me on that one. So that's definitely something, I hadn't got to really appreciate yet. And, hopefully it happens again in Toronto.
And also, just yourself, you're in featherweight now, but you mentioned like as you get older, the weight cuts get a little tougher. Like, do you see yourself competing at lightweight in the future?
As of right now, like since we've got the weight cuts dialed in, kind of since I mean, like the Jai Herbert fight that was at 155, but since then the Superboy fight, Blake Builder, my last fight against Fernando, all those weight cuts have been great. So as long as everything stays good with the weight cuts, I plan to stay at 145.
And typically for fighters, like at your weight class, I know heavier fighters at like 205 and 185, some of them go through drastic weight cuts. So is it like a weight cut where you start earlier, or is it like a comfortable weight cut going down to 145?
Yeah, I mean, I always like as soon as we get the notice, I'll start the weight cut and the dieting and stuff, and that just depends on how far out. Like some fights, they've given me a few weeks notice, and that makes it pretty tricky to get down to 145. But yeah, like this last fight I think was 5 or 6 weeks, so that was doable. The Blake Builder fight we had a little bit more. It was like 7 or 8 weeks. Same with Doho Choi. It was a little bit longer because the fight got moved from South Korea to Vegas and stuff. So yeah, so all these weight cuts have gone great.
The year and just even your training camp, like all the Canadians that are in around there, Crew Allen, obviously, like what's mood like every day, day-to-day training and just the Canadian MMA scene like?
Yeah, I mean it's great. It's definitely blowing up. As soon as we all kind of got signed on to UFC Vancouver, then we are all in a training camp. The energy was explosive everywhere because everyone was so excited. And then we all went and won in Vancouver. So then it just kind of continued. All the Canadian MMA fans have been super hyped since we won that one. And now we've gone on to, again, continue. I just won in Vegas. So we got Deanna Belbitsa is going to be fighting soon in Vegas as well. So all the Canadians are, doing a really good job. We got Charles Jourdain's fighting, I think, this Saturday. So yeah, like Canadians are on a roll right now, and it's definitely showing with the support we're getting in Canada.
Sure, there. And also you're giving back to the sport as well in Muskoka, the gym you created there. What factored in that decision? Because a lot of fighters, when they're retired, maybe they'll look into that, but you're training day to day and then also giving back to Muskoka. So what factored into that?
Yeah, it was something I always wanted to do was bring more martial arts to Muskoka, and yeah, like you said, it was always something I planned to do when I retired from MMA and had a little bit more spare time. But an opportunity came up, and a business partner approached me, and so yeah, I was like, oh, I guess we'll get it started now, and then with the help of the community and some other training partners and stuff, we've found a way to get the classes going Monday to Friday, and then I come in when I can and coach a few classes a week, and yeah, it's been going really well so far.
That's great. And like, have you seen some talent come up? Like, I know everyone looks at Montreal, Toronto, like big hubs there for like talent to come up, but Muskoka, like, have you seen any prospects there that could be the next Kyle Nelson?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, there's a lot of good athletic guys that are just coming out. We've been there for almost 2 years now, so we've got guys that are getting some super solid fundamentals down. We're starting getting some guys competing in amateur boxing and amateur kickboxing, obviously jiu-jitsu tournaments. So yeah, like the skill level is really growing in Muskoka, and yeah, I think we're gonna have some good athletes.
That's great. And just yourself too, like you're obviously devoting time with your family, training, and then fighting. Like, do you watch the sport regularly or just like even the UFC in general?
Yeah, I try to watch, all the big cards. Sometimes I'll do some of those like the streaming watch parties where there'll be like a camera on me and I'll interact with fans and stuff while we watch the fights. So I do enjoy doing that. Because I get to talk with the fans and kind of talk live while fights are happening and discuss, certain techniques or certain strikes and stuff like that with the fans. I really enjoy getting involved with the fans like that. But yeah, I mean, it is a pretty hectic life, with the family and the gym and training and stuff. So I miss the odd, UFC here and there.
Oh yeah, with all the cards coming up, it's understandable. Every single week, sometimes twice a week, we've seen. So, by any chance, did you see the main event with Alexa Grasso and Valentina Shevchenko?
Yeah. So I made it back. Made it back to the hotel. Grabbed a shower. We went to a bar in New York, and watched the fight. And like it was full again. Like I said, Vegas was full of Mexicans, so the bar was full, and they were all cheering super hard for Alexa. So it was um, it was hard to stay non-biased, I guess, while I was watching the fights. Like I'd see great stuff that Shevchenko was doing, but like Shevchenko would land a big kick and the bar would cheer for Grasso. And, Shevchenko would get a takedown and they'd be cheering for Grasso. I'm like, well, like I don't know if that's how this works. Like you can cheer, I guess, but like she lost that exchange. So it definitely made me maybe a little bit more biased just because of how the crowd was at the time. So, but I haven't had a chance to go back and watch the fight yet. I've heard again a bunch of mixed feelings, especially with the 10-8 round in the fifth round. And it sounds like the majority of people are leaning towards Shevchenko might have won that one. But yeah, I'll definitely have to watch it again.
And when you hear like a draw like that, like the fight was so entertaining back and forth, like you were witnessing just the fans how they were reacting. when it ends in a draw like that, do you think it takes away from just the athlete's performances, or do you think that's more of on the judges in that aspect?
So for this, I can't speak too much on this specific fight. I know I've seen a lot of fights before where I thought the draw was deserved. Um, my fight against Doho Choi, I don't think so much. But I remember watching, like one of Frankie Edgar's title fights, and it was a draw, and it was like, it felt like that was the only right call to make. Like, you couldn't really give it to either fighter, so the draw was the right decision. I'm not sure, again, with that 10-8 round, that kind of throws a weird kind of wrench in the dynamic of that draw. So I'm not sure about that fight, but I do think draws happen more than they get called. So I think there's a lot of fights that are so close they should be a draw, but sometimes they go to a split decision or something like that. So I don't think there's anything necessarily wrong with the draw, other than, like, the fighters are only going to get half their money, and that kind of stuff. But I mean, a draw is better than robbing one person of the fight. So yeah.
And it's Dana White said that they're gonna have a trilogy, so that should be exciting to see how that all pans out there. But Kyle, I just want to transition a little bit because the UFC this year that are celebrating their 30th anniversary, and I've been asking like all the fighters like when they began getting really interested or becoming a fan of the sport and the UFC in general. For you, at what point, like, what were your first memories of the UFC, and who were some of the fighters that really gravitated and made you a fan of MMA in general?
Yeah, so I started with the Ultimate Fighter in 2015, like the very first Ultimate Fighter. So then, there was like, well, obviously Chuck Liddell and Randy Couture were the coaches. Watching Forrest Griffin come up, Diego Sanchez, were some of my favorites, and that's what got me into the sport. And then George St. Pierre kind of came on the scene, and he was Canadian, so obviously he was like my favorite guy, for his entire career. But yeah, definitely the first season, The Ultimate Fighter, is when I kind of fell in love with the sport.
And is there like a fight that you remember vividly as a maybe growing up and seeing and thinking about like that should be in the UFC Hall of Fame type of thing?
Well, like that, obviously, Stephen Bonner versus Forrest Griffin. Like I watched the whole show, and then watched that finale, and that was, I'd only seen whatever, like 8 or 9 MMA fights up to that point, and then I saw that fight, which is still considered one of the best fights, and definitely an instrumental fight in, bringing fans and kind of reviving the UFC and bringing it into the mainstream. So definitely, Stephen Bonner versus Forrest Griffin.
Agree with you. That's a really good one. And Kyle, before we close here, just gonna ask you some quick rapid fire questions. Get your take on some of these questions here. First, who is the best striker in MMA?
Oh, I'd probably go with Alex Pereira right now. Yeah, I think technically he was winning the striking battle against Izzy before he got caught. So yeah, I think right now it's probably Alex Pereira.
Who is the best grappler?
Grappler is interesting because you got wrestling versus jits. When you talk about jits, you got guys like Ryan Hall, um, who's like a great jits guy. But then there's wrestling, and you got some like Bo Nickel. So probably wrestling we go with Bo Nickel. Grappling, we might go with Ryan Hall just for the jiu-jitsu of it.
Who's the funniest in the sport?
The funniest right now, I mean, Derek Lewis might take the cake. He's got some of the best interviews and stuff. So yeah, I think we'll have to go with Derek Lewis.
That's a good one. Who would you most like to have dinner with? Could be either a fighter, past your present, celebrity. Like, who would you be your ideal dinner party?
Dinner. I mean, I've got to spend some time with George St. Pierre, training with him and stuff. But I mean, just sit down with him and pick his brain at dinner. I think, to have him and like Frost Sahabi at dinner would be great. John Danaher, again, another coach. He's not a UFC fighter or anything, but I think some of those guys would be the best, to have at dinner to pick their brain and, get some of their ideas and stuff. And then Connor would be cool just for the sake of talking to him about how he markets, his stuff outside the UFC, like Proper 12, and now he's got the beer and stuff, and just kind of get his, kind of his business strategy behind some of that stuff, because that's something maybe I could take and implement in my career.
Good list there of names. Who would you love to have by your side in a street fight, in case something goes sour?
I'd probably just go with like one of the biggest, probably like Francis Ngannou, like one of the biggest dudes they could get. Just get a wall in there, and then you could handle 3 or 4 guys, even if he's not super technical. You always just gotta swing some stuff, and I'm sure even just the size would scare some people away.
That's a good. Who do you think has the coolest tattoos?
Coolest tattoos. I'm trying. I can picture the tattoo in my mind too, and it's like a Roman gladiator, with the Colosseum and stuff, I think, behind it. But I can't remember who it is that has it. But like definitely that style, like gladiator style tattoos. Not a big fan of the wings on the back. Seems like everybody's got the wings nowadays. So that seems a little overdone. But yeah, so I can't pick someone off my head. But if anybody can think of who that guy is with the Roman gladiator tattoo, I think that's probably one of my favorites.
Final ones here. Favorite movie?
My favorite movie is Braveheart with Mel Gibson, William Wallace there. Rocky was always up, and the Rocky sequels was always up in my top favorites when I was younger. But yeah, I think I'd have to go with Braveheart for sure.
Favorite TV show?
Favorite TV show, it switches up a lot. I know, like, one of the big ones for me was Vikings for sure. Like the first 4 or 5 seasons were definitely my favorite. I know they've come out with like a newer one, um, Vikings Valhalla or something like that. And I haven't seen any of that, but yeah, like the original Viking was definitely one of my favorites up until the point where the main character kind of died. So
And final rapid fire question. What would be a dream fight for yourself in the sport, and also a dream fight for you as a fan?
so I mean, obviously the Cub Swanson fight is something I'm really really looking forward to right now, and something that could happen for sure. Growing up in this sport, I was always, Diego Sanchez was one of my favorites, and I'd always kind of hope to fight him one day. He's not in the UFC anymore, so I don't think that'll happen. But yeah, he was one of the guys that I looked up to. But yeah, so I would just stick with Cub Swanson for now.
Hopefully that dream will become a reality there in January, Kyle. But before we let you go, how can our viewers here at Sportskeeda MMA stay up to date with everything you're doing, everything your gym's doing in Muskoka, and follow you on social media?
Yeah, so on Instagram, my handle is the monster 705 underscore UFC. On Twitter, it's the underscore underscore monster. And on Facebook, just Kyle the Monster Nelson.
Highly recommend that follow. And Kyle, I really appreciate you coming on here and recapping your win there, and talking about what's next, and giving us some insight into you behind the scenes of fighting. And I wish you all the best.
Yeah, thank you very much.